Hello, everyone. Um, I take it I can start now, so that's what I'm going to do. I hope that all the students here are safe and feeling healthy. Today's lecture is going to be about how to launch and design a personal website. I have thrown in a few things about online exhibitions because that is something that we're all thinking about recently, and I expect that this will probably be something that many of us will be thinking about as we move into the future. We don't really know what this new COVID landscape will look like, but I think it's sort of best to prepare as if we might be doing more virtual things. So just a little bit about myself before we go into the lecture. In case you don't know who I am, my name is Paddy Johnson. For many years, I ran a blog called Art of City, which focused on contemporary visual art in New York City. It was very well read, won many, many awards. It was the first blog to win a Creative Capital grant. This was back in 2008 when the web was still young and we thought the world's problems were going to be solved by bloggers. But so that's kind of my background, and I've spent, because I've spent so much time running a blog and thinking about online managing an online presence and online projects. I really know a lot about artists' websites, and I also know a lot about sort of how to navigate the online world. And so that's really what I'm here today to do, is to try and help you all navigate some of that. So so that's sort of an overview of what this is, and we're going to move to the next. I think we're just going to dive right in. So I think, like, the first thing I always try and tell people is to scope out your online website and exhibition project and think about your time and resources. Because one of the things that I find is a particular thing that I feel like if I do it, probably a lot of people do it. So I'm like, oh, I need a website. I wish I had it yesterday. I'm going to come up with a whole thing, and it should be done in like 2 days. Normally, ambitious website projects take at least 3 weeks, even if you're doing something relatively small. And I think, for like a company, it might be more along the lines of 3 months. As a personal website, if you really just want to throw something up there, you can get it done in a very short period of time. So you could literally just throw something up there in a matter of, a day, and it wouldn't be that bad, but you wouldn't be such a time suck. But I think, usually, I always think it's best to really kind of consider what your online presence is going to look like and what picture you're putting forth into the world. And I guess the other thing I wanted to mention is that I feel like within the, there's some question, I think, sometimes as to whether you even need a website. Well, you have Instagram, you have, you have, what is the Beyonce, you have all of these different platforms for which you can show your work. Like, why do you really need this thing that you're in charge of? And I think that we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we go through the lecture. But it really is very important that you do have your own website. And part of that is just really owning your own material and your career. So having a website, in my opinion, really means like having ownership of your career and being able to manage your public facing identity. And the best way to do that is to be managing your own personal website. Now, if you were to, you know, do something very ambitious that was along the lines of, you know, if let's say you're not thinking about a personal website, you're thinking about like an exhibition, you might want to be thinking about like, well, what can I do in the amount of time I have? Like, what's my timeline? And like, what is the best way for people to connect with me? So this is one of the reasons that I have these like AR projects kind of laid out front, because I find that this is something that people very often want to do. They want to, you know, create an entire world, and usually that takes quite a bit of time, A, and B, it takes quite a bit of resources on the part of the viewer. And your job as somebody who is a student or, you know, an art professional is to really take all of the burden off of the viewer. So the only thing you want to do is you want them to get to the website with as few clicks and with as little effort as possible. You know, I think one of the questions, let's see, hold on, I've seen some chats here. Wanted to pull up. Oh, I see. Yes, should everybody send questions via chat or wait until the end? Thanks, Gregory, for asking that question. If you would like, you can send the questions as you go, but I think I would prefer if you kept them to the end, just because as you've already experienced right now, I just tried to answer a question and I did kind of not the best job at it, but like definitely write them down or whatever you need to do, because I want to make sure that all of your questions are answered. How to execute a project that you like. I think the first way to do that is to find examples of personal websites and online exhibitions that you think do a good job. So identify what you don't like and identify what you do like. So, and this is the nice thing about web stuff, I always think, is that there are hundreds of people out there, thousands really, who have spent like their lifetimes just solving UX design problems, meaning like, you know, how do you get a viewer from one place to another? So if they've already done that work, your job is simply to copy it. There's no shame in that. In fact, that's what you should be doing, because those are solutions that actually work. And then what your job is to simply make sure that the content on the site really communicates who you are and what you do. So when you're executing an online project, you know, you have to be asking questions like, what is the workflow? Who's doing it? When do you want to launch? In the case of a personal website, 9 times out of 10, you are doing all of the work. Sometimes I always find, so I recently relaunched my website. I did so with the help of a friend who knows a lot about design. So if you have a friend who's in a design program, definitely get their feedback. I think one of the lessons that I feel is really sort of critical for the 21st century is that collaboration is the way to get a lot of things done at a much higher professional level. So whenever you can get feedback from friends, and I mean, definitely distinguish the difference between friends who are experts, you know, they are in a design program, they have taken these classes, versus, you know, a friend who may not have any idea what you're talking about. You know, there is a value in expertise. And then try to be realistic about what you can do. So always try to think about, you know, what your timeline is, when you think you can get what you think is a reasonable objective, and then launch it. If you don't have a website and you're starting from scratch, which I would imagine a lot of you, you know, are doing, the timeline might be a little loose, but there tends to be an urgency around events. So if you have an exhibition that is going up or a performance that you are about to launch, you know, it's always good to have your website online for that. But the other thing I would say is that if you want to get a performance gig or get an exhibition, you really need to have your own website up and running, because that signals to all of the people that all of the other professionals that you may be working with, that you too are serious. So having your own website signals a kind of seriousness in your craft and a dedication. So that's why it's really important to have one. And it's also important to think about, you know, what you want to have on the website. This is something that this is a picture for those who may not recognize it. This is a picture of the Matthew Barney drawing restraint exhibition at Barbara Gladstone. One of the things that this particular artist was very well known for was he was an athlete who would sort of applied the processes, or like this sort of thinking of an athlete to the art making process. So like, you know, if you could, restraints would sort of necessarily make the body stronger if you pushed against them. And the same thing could be said of the creative act, that when there is certain kind of restraints, then that forces creativity. So this is, in a lot of ways, I mean, I think there are probably many more things that are, it's not even probably, there are definitely many more things that are crappy about the COVID crisis than there are positives. But I think one positive that we can take out of this is that there are a lot more restraints on what we can do when online is basically our avenue for expression. And those kinds of restraints force us to come up with problems, with answers to problems that we would not be thinking about without those restraints. So that's why I think it's always just sort of important to think about these restraints that as both like having positive and negative effects. And I think within the visual arts world, which is the world that I come from, I think one of the more sort of well-known problems that that people talk about are artists that become so successful that they're almost in a sense overfunded. And so when you can try out any idea, no matter how bad, you end up kind of making stuff that normally would get weeded out because of financial restraints. So in some, restraints actually are a very good thing. So let's say you are now in a position where you're like, okay, I definitely want a website. I am going to get one. What do I need to think about? So with platform considerations, and I talked about this a bit earlier, but with platform considerations, one of the things I always think it's important for everybody to think about is the freemium model. And to just be a little bit wary of it, because usually freemium means free now, but not forever, or free, but you get like all sorts of things that you really don't want on them. So it's free, but like your entire website will be branded with the software that hosts name all over it. So it's not, it doesn't look, it looks not that professional because you're not paying for the removal of the branding. But because with freemium, the other problem, and I think this is really the biggest problem with freemium, is that because you're not actually paying anything to a company, they don't have any responsibility to you. So if you put your images up on a freemium website, you can't expect to have them there forever, or to be able to use them in the way that you want to. The other thing is intellectual property. This is something that also comes up with freemium platforms. Sure, you can put all your stuff up on a platform for free, but then they own it, right? So you want to make sure that you understand the intellectual property rules, and then what you can do to manage your content. And this goes to media access. Once you upload your material, can you get your stuff back out? If you invest a lot of time and energy in projects, you want to be able to preserve them. You can move work. Can you move that work from one platform to another, or is that work just lost? Is it prohibitively difficult? Now, this is these are the kinds of questions that usually require a lot of research. And I would also say that at a certain point, like, the barrier to understanding all of this can feel a little prohibitively difficult, meaning there is so much to know about all the individual websites. How can you really decide which one is best for you? Well, so this is where I have some good news for you. I actually have tried an enormous number of them. So I'm going to go over some of those in some of the following slides. But before we do that, I'm going to talk about the importance of buying your own domain. This can be done at GoDaddy or name.com. There's a bunch of other ones too. As long as they are domain providers, it doesn't really matter which one you choose. They're all various permutations of evil. I don't know why that is. It's just been sort of my experience that all of them have these, like, sort of, the world of domains is kind of dark, let's say. And that's just sort of the way it is. That industry is that way. So I think it was maybe like 2012 or 14, there was a lot of negative press about GoDaddy, and Name was the one that you should go use, and then a lot of negative press came out about that. So I would just say, like, just buy one from a domain registrar that's been around for a long time. That way you know you're like, they're a fairly safe company. The thing I would say is that don't buy your domain through Squarespace or Wix.com or any of those other website hosts where you're renting software from them. It's slightly easier to set up, but if you ever want to take your domain elsewhere, it's hard. So they're going to make it difficult to point your domain anywhere else, because their main platform, their main business is renting their own platform. So they have no incentive to making it easy for you to point your domain wherever you want it. They're only going to make it easy for you to point your domain at Squarespace, and then everything else is going to be a headache. So that's why you go with GoDaddy or name.com, and you don't purchase from Squarespace or Wix.com. So the difference between the two is, one is a domain registrar. They only sell domains. So that's GoDaddy and name.com. And the other is a you know, a software provider. So Squarespace and Wix.com, they're renting various software platforms that allow you to customize their websites. So Squarespace builds itself as a community of creators. So you can see here, it says like whether you're an illustrator, designer, or artist, Squarespace is chosen by the world's most talented creative professionals. Amy Sherald, who did the portrait of Barack Obama, is featured as someone who has a Squarespace website. So that is sort of the caliber. They also do a lot of websites for performance artists. They have a calendar function that they offer. So there's so you can like show your, you know, your upcoming performance dates, this sort of thing. So they have a lot of software that is really customized for creative professionals. Here you can see I've tried to give you some pros and cons about the Squarespace platform. So one pro, they have amazing customer chat support Monday through Friday. Now, as somebody who uses this is my preferred way of, I'll read what I can on their help forms or any help form, but I use customer chat all the time. And I do it for Google, I do it for MailChimp, I do it, well, MailChimp doesn't have it, but there's a bunch of their competitors that do. I do it, you know, I do it for Squarespace. And of all of the chat services that I use, Squarespace is by far the best. They have people who are really courteous. They give you hacks for things that you want to do if their platform isn't letting you easily do that. They're just, and they follow up over email. They're really great. So I definitely recommend that. They have unlimited storage. That means that you can upload as many images as you want. For people who are dealing with images and videos, that's a big deal. They have limited a la carte functionality. So this is the way that I like to think about different platforms. There are the platforms, they're a little like airlines. You know, I don't know how many of you guys have ever read on Spirit, flown on Spirit Airlines. It's not really my favorite because you get this like low price, but then suddenly you're paying for your, you know, even if you don't have any baggage, you're paying for the no baggage fee. You know, if you want a soda, you have to pay for that. You have like, you're gonna sit in a seat, there's a fee to sit in the seat. Like all of this stuff that you think should just be included in the ticket price is not. And then you can fly Delta and like basically everything is included in their price, but their price is a little bit more expensive. The same thing sort of applies for different websites. So Squarespace is sort of more like the Delta Airlines. And, you know, and we'll get to Wix. Wix is maybe a little bit more like Spirit, my experience. So the other thing that they have is unlimited contributors at the business level. That's something that like is definitely something when you're choosing a website to kind of pay attention to. If you're just doing a regular personal website, you're not going to need to think about how many contributors you have. You're only going to have one, maybe two if you have like a really close friend or partner or somebody who you might be working with. But you know, if you're, let's say you're a performance troupe, then you might want everybody to have control over the website. And then suddenly the number of contributors becomes very important. And the number of contributors is something in most software rental programs that they'll charge for. So it's kind of nice that at the business level, which is not too much more. You know, they have, I put here like their monthly rate and their annual rate. So the lower rate down here is the annual. It works out to 18 per month and 26 if you're doing a business, or for your personal, 12 per month annually, or 16 per month personal. So, you know, these things do kind of add up. Obviously, if you can pay for the annual function, if you can pay annually, it's better. And this is like, you know, I feel like these prices, they don't seem like so much per month, but I mean, when you're paying for this, you know, in one lump sum, it does, you know, it's $200 and something, and it ends up sort of feeling a lot for the business. But, you know, you do have to kind of think about this as like, okay, this is a business expense. I can write it off. And this is what I need to do to really present myself professionally. So the cons with Squarespace is they have design limitations that can be very annoying. These are the types of things that are sort of probably a little too much to go into in this lecture, but because they're all in templates, they're gonna have certain limitations. So their 7.0 platform, which is not the very newest, but the most up-to-date, has a bunch of different templates, and they all do different things. So sometimes, for example, you might want to change the background color on the front page, but not change it on some of the secondary navigation pages. And in 7.0, on some templates, you can't do that. So that's kind of an example of a limitation that can be kind of annoying, and there's no real way around that. Their newest 7.1 platform has a lot more functionality, so I really like it. However, if you care about captioning for images, you might be disappointed because right now it doesn't support that because it's relatively new. The one thing I will say about Squarespace, though, is that they are a company that's kind of known for constantly improving their product, which is not necessarily a given, right? Like people make updates to like companies make updates to software all the time, and sometimes you end up with things that really just don't work anymore, right? So the fact that they seem to be pretty well run and are constantly improving their product is a pro. They have lots of in-house services like mailers, which I would put in the pro and con. You can use it's a very cheap service. I actually use it, but that's because I think MailChimp is really overpriced, and I am not really at the level where I feel like I need that level of analytics, but I probably will soon. So MailChimp is preferable, but they cost a fortune, in my humble opinion. So like Squarespace, I think their fee is like, I can't even remember, it might be like 25 or 30, somewhere between 25 and 30 bucks a month for me, and I have like 12,000 people on my mailing list. For, you know, you all, if you don't have over 500, I think it might be free. So that's something to consider. And price, you know, unless someone maintains the site by paying the annual fee, it will eventually be taken offline. So that's something to consider, right? Like, you know, once you have this website, you're kind of on the hook for maintaining it, unless eventually you decide that you don't want it. And so that, and it is, you know, it's not cheap. So Wix, this I find is particularly popular amongst emerging artists starting out. They too have, you know, you can see here, I put screen grabs for the creative sector, creative templates. So they have a lot of them. The nice thing about the way that Wix works is you sort of end up with an open canvas that you can sort of essentially work yourself. Whereas the Squarespace templates tend to be filled with like kind of panels, and there's some navigation that's involved with that. So I guess what I'm saying here is that Wix might be slightly more intuitive to use at first. That said, it can be buggy. So this is the reason I think a lot of people use the free version. So you guys may or may not be familiar with Social Distance Gallery. This is a online project that works on Instagram that digitally, like they just post BFA and MFA thesis exhibitions that have been canceled on Instagram. So they have a Wix website that they use. They use the free version. So wixsite.com/social distance is in the URL. In their case, that's fine because they're meant to be a temporary project. You know, the Wix site, they don't really need to pay for a custom URL. And then the only reason that this website exists is to give people instructions on how to submit. So you can see here too, the importance of considering the various platforms and what their uses are. So one platform, the Instagram platform, is used just to share information, like share the shows and distribute them. The website is there to collect submissions, and it's a lot easier to do that on a website than it is the Instagram profile page, which is not designed to do that at all. So, part of what I want everybody to be thinking about when they start thinking about their website is, what am I using this website for? Is it the best way to, is what I'm using it for the best tool? Because websites have their own strengths and weaknesses, and it's important to know what you're engaging and why. So here you can see they have the combo for personal use. It looks a little cheaper, unlimited, pro, and VIP. So you can see they have a free version. They too have unlimited storage. This actually is an error here. Their whole problem, in my estimation, is that they have a lot of a la carte functionality issues. So once you start, let's say you want to collect money on your website for something, Wix makes that a little bit harder. You have to pay to use the PayPal functionality that's not totally garish and awful, for example. The other thing here, of course, is they don't offer customer support, and their mobile optimization can be buggy. So, and with bugs, if you're just renting software, there's not a heck of a lot you can do about it, right? Because you don't have control over the back end. That's the company's job, and it's really up to them to figure out those bugs. Now, of course, if it means the websites don't work, they're going to fix them. But there's certain things like, if it's just not showing up perfectly, they may not know to make, your website or that particular bug a priority. So the other very popular software is WordPress. So WordPress has, I don't know, probably a million themes. They have so many different themes, and it's very flexible. So you can literally get into the code if you're of that type of that mind, and make your website look exactly how you want it to. So WordPress has a lot more functionality and flexibility built into the design. The templates are basically, you know, pre-existing designs that you can modulate yourself, which is true of all the different platforms. And you can see at the back end, this is just a screenshot of what they offer. On the back end, I don't have any, actually, I can't even, so I follow certain WordPress sites, or I have at some point, but this is oh, this is because it's on my site here. So this was, I have a reader that I can use, and it works a little bit like, I'm not actually sure what the best way to describe this is, because you guys are sort of pre-RSS feed people, but there used to be a thing where, you know, basically what it does is anytime a WordPress site that you're following updates on your back end, it tells you that there's a new update. So you can stay up to date with the people in the WordPress network that you're following. Now, you know, I think one question you might have is like, well, why would I care about that? And you know, unless everybody is on WordPress, a lot of times you don't really. But as a kind of side note, I do think I feel like I have to just sort of stick in this kind of political note about this. Like, one of my great frustrations with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram is that their algorithms are not public. So when you go to the Dewey, like when you go to the library, it is very clear you can use the Dewey Decimal System. You know how the Dewey Decimal System works, and you can go find your book, and you know why you found it, because you're using this Dewey Decimal System that is publicly available. That is not the case with Facebook or Twitter. It's not apparent why you're looking at the things you're looking at. So the thing that I like about the WordPress Reader is that there's no algorithm other than you decided that you wanted to follow somebody and you wanted to keep up with their updates. They don't prioritize other than by the most recent update. And I think that that is a very important functionality that I privilege. So just to give you an example, this is like the Johnson Family Archive. So this is my family's website. I built this for them on WordPress this is maybe 2 years ago. So you can see, you know, I made this little like crest for them, and there's like a bunch of different pages here. I did this because I wanted my parents to, let's say something happened to Facebook, like I wanted them to be able to look at that. I want to say that I know some basic HTML, meaning like, you know, I can identify a hex code, you know, to change like white to black or something like that. And I kind of know some very basic tags and things like that that would allow me to like change the size of a font. That's really the extent of it, but I still made this website. So, you know, if you have, like, I think you need some basic knowledge, but not, you know, not tons. I will say though, you know, and what you get in exchange is a lot more freedom, right? So that's a really good thing, but you're always kind of navigating the exchange between what is the freedom I get versus the amount that I have, the amount of resources I have to spend for that freedom. So sometimes the resources you're spending are cash. Sometimes the resources you're spending are time. And that's, the time is the resource that I think is probably the most important to keep in check, or just to be able to track, because it's really the most fluid and the most easy to lose track of. At least with your money, you kind of, you know, you only have a certain amount of it. Time feels like it's endless, except that it's really not, and that you run into, you can run into barriers quite quickly. Which brings me to the next point. So in order to make this whole family website, what I did is I had to produce a user manual. You know, this document is, I don't know, like 10 pages long. You can see all of these things like, how do I log in, FTP, SSH. You know, the upshot was that, you know, I wanted everybody to be able to update the blog as they wanted. But because I had to produce this manual, nobody really wanted to do that. I mean, I went a little overboard. As you can see, there's a style guide here. The Johnson family probably does not need its own typography and color palette, but I picked one regardless, as I thought that would be fun. But yeah, anyway, the upshot is that I'm the one that really maintains the website. So the other thing is that, like, you know, there's all sorts of custom WordPress art themes out there, and you really just need to find them. So some of them are labeled. This one I thought was kind of interesting because it was developed by some tech people at VCU. The coding is available at GitHub. So you will be able to access the code if you want to use this. Now, this is for an art show, which I think is slightly different than, say, if you were using it for a website. But you really wouldn't have to work that hard if you wanted to modulate this into a personal website. And in any event, the other thing to know about this particular website is that it was modeled after MoMA's design. So that's why this kind of minimal structure exists. It's just, and again, going back to what we had talked about earlier, if you want to, one of the important things to know when you are choosing an individual site is, you know, what is the site what are the sites that I like? So in this case, somebody said MoMA, and lo and behold, we have something modeled after some of the pages on MoMA. So I'm just gonna play this little tour from the tech guy that developed this. Oh. Here we are.
All right, so this is a super simple, all right. So this is a super simple WordPress theme that's meant to showcase artworks. So it should hold just about anything WordPress does normally, so videos, images, etc. It's not doing anything special except trying to be very minimal and stay out of your way. So what we've got going on here is we have two types of pages. We have a regular page, which, you know, super plain. And then we have kind of this art installation template page, which just does one extra thing, which is put the title here and give you a description field for whatever it is you're describing. Could be an individual installation, could be a series of works, could be really anything you want. But that's all it really does. And it's meant to look pretty decent mobile, you know, but also take advantage when you're in a desktop view. So that's all there is to it. To make something like this, like for instance the strangers piece, all I did was put in my title like normal, dropped in my pictures with some text, and then sent my template here to Art Installation. That's what gives you that frozen piece on the left and gives you a place to put the description right here. So turning this on in WordPress should let you do that. You can use the classic editor like I am, or you can use the Gutenberg one to do fancier things. You could integrate this with all sorts of different pieces to make it do fancier stuff, but really that's all there is to it. Hopefully it'll kind of grow and improve as we get some people using it and we get some feedback, but that's what it is for right now.
All right, so you can see that was just like a little tour of the website that he made. The thing that I liked about that was that he looked in the even just in the tour, he shows you what the website looks like on a desktop and what it looks like on mobile. So when you're developing something, you're almost always doing it on a desktop, and it's very easy to forget that actually most people are probably going to be looking at your site on a phone. So it's really important to toggle back and forth and make sure that both things look more or less the same, or like more or less good. And that's something that I think both Squarespace and Wix can kind of struggle with in terms of compatibility. And I think it's like one of those things that like the development of software is going to get better at handling those things. But right now, that's something that you especially just want to always be checking, because when people look at your stuff, you don't know what type of screen they're looking at it on. So, you know, I've chosen a platform. Now what? This is a GIF by Anthony Antonellis that sort of responds to the issue of online graduation that I thought was sort of both sad and poignant. So the branding and marketing. All the work that goes into branding and marketing for your shows is the same work that you would do for your own website. In other words, an online exhibition dovetails into professional development classes or like professional development and provides a necessary skill set to all artists. So this is not an example of a personal website, but like an example of what you can do with some of that software that then dovetails into exhibitions that you can use your websites for. So, you know, this is a show, it's an animated GIF show called Well Now What the Fuck. And this show organized itself in terms of like, it looked like sort of 90s chat rooms in my estimation. Oh, can you speak about the format website builder at all? I'm actually not sure I understand that question. If you could, Ella, if you could clarify, that would be great. And let's see, here we are. Oh, format.com. I actually have not used format.com, so I'm not, that is something that I'm not able to speak to, but we can Google that after and I'll take a look at it. So yeah, so this is, well now what the fuck, this is, I think this was not built on a cookie cutter site, but you can see that this particular exhibition brought together 80 different artists. So it's quite large, and it hosts 80 different GIFs, and they're all organized in these little rooms. So it's things that I wanted to talk about just in terms of like what you would need for some of this. So the logos. You know, your logo must be legible, and you should not be using abbreviations unless widely used and known. in the case of a personal website, probably you don't need to think about a logo that much, but you did see on my presentation, I have Paddy Johnson and like the J is a pink and like, you know, so I did think about how it was going to look, even though it's just my name, right? So that's something to be thinking about. But in terms of abbreviations, NJCU is, for example, an acceptable short form of New Jersey City University. They use it on their logo, whereas NYAA is not an acceptable short form of for New York Artists Association, because too many other organizations will share that same short form. I actually don't even know if New York Artists Association exists, but I just sort of assume it does because that would be you know, a sort of common name. The other thing to think about is to make sure that your logo appears in the favicon. The favicon is this small area in the browser window that appears on the tab, and it's just a little icon. And if you don't fill in the favicon, what happens is that whatever your template software is that you're using, they'll just automatically fill it. So rather than having your logo there, what shows up is like in Squarespace, for example, it'd just be like a square. For WordPress, you get the W. For Wix, you'd get whatever the Wix logo is. I think it's actually their name. I'm not sure, but in any event, you don't want that. You want your own thing so that when people are browsing through multiple tabs, they can find your website. The navigational headers, don't try to be too poetic here. I think you want to use new nouns that everybody can understand. So standardized menus should be adhered to whenever possible. So for example, photography tells a user more than see. Installation views tells a user more than all of it. About tells a user more than information. Now, I just made some of these things up. About tells a user more than information. That I actually see very commonly on artist websites of all ilk. And I think about is just much more informative, because the information, you don't know what kind of information you're getting, right? Like, you know, it could be venue information, it could be about information, but you don't know. So about gives you more of a navigational cue. And my advice is to avoid drop-down menus. The reason for that is that drop-down menus can, they'll overlap other important information on the website very often in ways that are sort of visually disruptive. So you end up with these like drop downs that are squares. So alternatives to this include mega menus. So a mega menu, rather than it's a drop down, but rather than it being sort of like a small chunk, it's like a very large, it takes over, like you click on it and it takes over, say, a third of the space on your browser. So that's a useful thing, and visually it's not disrupting anything. So the big thing is you want to make sure that people get to where they want to go in an efficient way, and there's no kind of visual disruption to their path. Another thing is a hamburger menu. That's just a series of 3 lines. Sometimes it's 2 if it's very small. And scroll triggered menus. So that's scroll trigger menus are just menus typically at the side of a browser, either the left or right, where you can just click on sort of little radio buttons, and it'll click you down to the next spot on the menu. So those are all ways of kind of avoiding the drop-down menu that can create sort of visual disruption in a way that is not great for the user. So the homepage should immediately communicate the purpose of the website. An arresting banner image, which does not compete with any overlaid text, can be used. Now, this is one thing I want to just flag this as a potential issue, because I see this quite a bit. You know, people will choose, and it's really a ubiquitous thing. You choose like this really arresting banner image, but then the font that goes over top of it is illegible. And the problem with that, of course, is one, you can't read whatever somebody is trying to tell you, and two, like, you've kind of ruined this great banner image. So you really want to make sure that the text you're using is communicating something. And most importantly, when you land on the home page, it should immediately communicate the purpose of the website, because if it doesn't, somebody's going to click off it as soon as they get there. Because, I mean, you all know what it is like to be browsing online. Like, you don't want to waste your time on any website where you feel like you shouldn't be. So you want to make sure that you're communicating very clearly right from the get-go, so you can collect visitor attention. Exhibition pages. This is like if you're working with a group, you know, artists and teachers would need to decide, like, you know, will the show consist of curated group shows? Will there be any virtual environments created? Will it be organized by students or teachers? That's, you know, that's sort of a different thing. But the artist pages, these are things that I think, like, you should definitely have. A biography, that should be in a PDF. A CV, that should be in a PDF. Selected images, that should be, those should just be, I think the thing about your selected images is that they should be very clearly labeled and nicely photographed. One of the things I very often see is like photographs that were taken on a cell phone from like 5 years ago or 10 years ago, when cell phone photographs were just like terrible. And so you really can't tell what's going on in the photograph. I think the most important thing for the photographs that you put on the website is that they clearly communicate what the event was, and you know, that they're arresting images, because the thing is that these images are telling the viewer a story of who you are and what kind of work you make. So the better the images, the better the documentation, the more your website is going to work for you. And this, I also just want to flag this. This is the thing that I think people think won't take them a lot of time, but actually ends up taking quite a bit of time. Curating images that work well with particular designs is not easy. Even if you have like an eye that is super well suited to the job, you'll probably end up trying different images and seeing what works and what doesn't work. And that's really important, to be able to go through all that and know what works and what doesn't through trial and error. The other thing that's, you know, it's not on this, but I think is really important for students to think about in terms of like what their discipline is and how they're organizing their website, is how their work is going to be organized. Now, I think a very common way to organize website work on a website is simply chronologically. I like that method, but I would add the caveat that it is always good to be able to use thumbnails for a splash page that then lead into something more that lead you to other things. I'm going to show you, I'm going to get out of this particular PowerPoint in a minute and show you that on my own website, just so you have a sense of what that is. But I'll do that in a minute, because I also want to go over the footer information. This should have A mailing list sign up, a pop-up is not a bad idea too. This is one thing that I think is often overlooked, which is the importance of a mailing list. The mailing list is the most important tool you have, you know, because you never know, like, users on websites, like different social platforms, the activity is going to vary from year to year. You don't know, like, what platform is going to be important and what one is not. And there's no way to predict that. And because of that, you can develop a big following and then, you know, and then have it kind of disappear overnight because somebody changes an algorithm or it doesn't work right. And in a certain sense, mailing lists are that's a problem for them too, because you don't have any control over how Gmail sees your mailers and whether it thinks it's spam or, you know, a social promotion or whatever. However, you still have more control because you have direct access to people than you do with an algorithm that sort of randomly decides in a way that you're completely unaware of who is a relevant audience to you amongst your followers and who is not. Like, at least with email, it is the person receiving the email that makes that decision for you. So, so I always think that it's really important to be able to do that with them, with a mailing list, because you'll just, once you have it, you'll have it forever. And the other thing I wanted to mention is font usage. This is particularly relevant for people who are using fonts in the visual fine art world, but galleries tend to prefer sans serif fonts for logo usage. And they tend not to be like, they tend to be very restrained fonts, meaning like you're not going to see any crazy 60s bubble letters for a font or something like that, because that would sort of indicate that maybe you were participating in a different industry. Like, because you are promoting yourself as a person normally, you want a font that suggests a kind of individuality, but is not kind of connected to anything that like might read as a product, you know, which some of these like weirder fonts often do. Like if you, so that is why I think a lot of galleries tend to use these like sort of more restrained fonts. And the other thing you see, now I can't even remember the name of the gallery, but there was a gallery that ran, like it had red lettering and an underline under their logo. And I was just like, I found it really difficult to take that logo, that gallery seriously, because their logo seems so out of step with that particular world. So it's really the same thing when you are putting together a website. Now, again, I mentioned this earlier, like when you're putting together, your name, 9 times out of 10, like that, you can find a Google font or something like that that is going to work fine for you. So I wouldn't stress out over it. I guess, my general word of warning, though, is that if you are producing something, if you're producing a website, you kind of want to be cognizant that that different fonts read different ways. So let's see, I just wanted to escape briefly to show you, excuse my million tabs here, but I just wanted to show you, okay. So now you can see I used an emoji for my favicon, Why did I do that? Because I'm not a graphic designer and I couldn't come up with anything that seemed to look right. So that was just the, so this is my website. I spent about like 3 or 4 weeks redesigning it last month. Now, this is what I was talking about in terms of like a personal website. So these are the kind of navigational cues that you could use for certain bodies of work, right? So like everybody knows where they're going. And this is my communications work, right? So it's logos. But look at the difference between that and let's take a look at the curating. So you can see here, here's what my curating looks like. Very different. And then, and I think the special events and like whatever else looks, and projects looks fairly similar. And then if you go, here we are. So now I've chosen an image here that I thought was going to play pretty well. And I didn't put any text over it because I don't really need it. And then here is the slideshow. So you can see here the different elements that I've used in order to make sure that when somebody is navigating, they kind of know why they're navigating. So I wanted a little bit more than just having this menu header that says, you know, Artist City Goth Opera Benefit. I wanted to make sure that there was a picture associated with it. So when they click through, they kind of had some idea as to what event they'd be looking at beyond just this sort of simple text description. So I think that's sort of something to think about. And then let's see here, back presentation. And then, so this has to do with exhibition durations. Because I think because I did throw some of this in just in terms of when you're developing your online website, it just seemed pretty clear to me that you might end up doing an online exhibition because this is sort of the way things are being organized right now. And so I just wanted to sort of think about some of these things. So like, can your website be online forever? You know, it's up to you. But if you were to do an online exhibition, you know, there's no, with the press works always on a cycle of actual urgency and manufactured urgency. So if there's no actual urgency, like I'm telling this news to you today, but the event will be over tomorrow, then you have to manufacture your urgency. So even though this online exhibition can stay online forever, I'm going to limit it to X amount of time so that people have to get there. You know, should I have an opening for my virtual show? Absolutely. If I would recommend this, let's say you've launched your website, you know, like there's always things to do around the launch of things that you're doing, virtual or IRL, that are good to do. So the Well Now What the Fuck exhibition, they held a 5-hour-long opening, and that allowed East and West Coast people to attend, gave everybody a chance to talk about their work. They had 80 people, so that was quite a bit. It was really laid back, and they used the chat function on Twitch for cluster conversations. And should I hold events? Absolutely. How do I get people to my website? So if you're doing an online exhibition, you know, you should be contacting local papers and radio stations. These are the types of stories they love to run because there aren't a lot of actual events happening. How do you, you know, I think the larger question is, how do I get people to my regular old website? And this goes back to kind of manufacturing press events and reasons to contact people. So, you know, I think one of the funny things, it's just an experience that I had early on when I was running the blog, is I always felt like I was running behind and doing things wrong because like I had to reach out multiple times to people because I hadn't finished this thing and I was giving them updates on this thing that I was working on. But actually, it turns out that's really what you need to be doing. And that's kind of what you use social media for. So obviously, you know, Instagram is a very good medium to get people out. Your mailing list is a very good medium to get people out. And, you know, if you want to be reaching out to people and building your press list, the best way to do that is to make sure that you find the names of people on your, who you can add to your mailing list who might write about your work. So how would you do that? Right here, what I've done, I just, like, this was just a sort of random, you know, I went to the Kansas City Star, found their website, and down here you can see, you know, there's About Us, Contact Us. So here under Contact Us, they have the name and the email of the editor and the managing editor. They have their work phones. So you can actually call them. You know, if you have letters to the editors, there's emails there. So, and the reason that newspapers have these listings is that reporters and people who write about events, they want to hear from you. You know, oftentimes they don't know what they want and what they don't want. And it's your job to kind of, or how do I say this? They don't know what they're missing unless somebody tells them. So it's your job to make sure that they know that you're out there doing things. And they may not be interested in the first thing you do, but I can guarantee you, if you keep contacting them, eventually they will care. So that is the sort of, you know, you really just, you can wear down a source, or you can, you know, until eventually a non-source, until eventually they are a source, you know, or you can, and this will happen else, you know, I think once the quarantining stops, like the other thing you can do is you can, you know, make sure that you're kind of aware of the things that they do, and reach out to them about other things they've done, because you know, you always want to make sure that the person you're contacting doesn't feel like the only reason, I mean, the only reason you are contacting them is because you want them to do the, you know, you want their coverage, but like you do kind of have to treat them like they're a human being, and that, like, in the sense that they're gonna want to know, like, that you chose them for a reason, that like that you've read something they've written, that there's a, that, you know, that there's a real kind of motivation on your part beyond, that looks like maybe a little bit more like collaboration or like helping somebody out than it is just a purely self-serving thing. So that's something to think about. And the other thing to think about is search engine optimization. So this is sort of a funny thing, in the sense that, you know, we've just talked a little bit about how important it is, how important mobile is and how important social media is. But, you know, if somebody finds out, like, let's say you're at an opening, somebody learns your name, they want to see what you do, they remember your name, they lost your business card, they want to be able to Google it. If you don't have a personal website, and you just have an Instagram, it's going to be impossible for somebody to find your work. So that's, again, the reason to have a website. But you also want to make sure that your website actually comes up when you are Googled. And the best reason, or the best way to do that, is to make sure that your website is listed on Google Business. So Google Business, there's something that you have to do to get your website listed on Google Business. You have to, what you have to do is prove that you're an actual business. So you can fill out all the forms, but then Google has to send something to a physical mailing address, and then within a certain amount of time, you have to fill that form out and fill it out online. And once you do that, Google will say, okay, great. I understand that you're an actual business, and I will put you on our map, and I will put you on our, I will rank you higher. And Google kind of likes its own, it likes to privilege its own products. So if you are on Google Business, it's like, oh, this person has been verified by us, and we see this person as someone who we can, potentially make money off of. So they'll recognize you as a real person. And the funny thing, this is sort of an aside, but I find it very interesting, is Google used to measure their success as a search engine by how quickly people left Google, right? So they understood that if somebody found what they were looking for and they left the page, then that was a sign of their own success. Now they don't do that. And the reason is kind of twofold. One, you've probably noticed if you ask a question, now Google will serve back like chunks of information. So now, if you say, what is Paddy Johnson? Like Google will like search and then bring back an answer for that. If that question is answered on Google, then you're not leaving, you haven't left Google. Now that's a problem for someone like me, right? And someone like you, because you want to make sure that people actually get onto your page. But that is one reason why you create an FAQ page, is because Google recognizes, like, who is Paddy Johnson? There's an answer to it, but then they'll have like a little square box that says, who is Paddy Johnson? And you can like literally click on that link. The other thing is that you can use SEO features like tags and descriptions. So description fields, so Google knows what to pull. So that's just giving like extra metadata to all of your images, so that Google has, like, it just knows that a real person is behind it, and it can be a little smarter. But the other thing is that those SEO tags feed into what is called website accessibility. And so what that means is that you want your website to be accessible to people who have disabilities. And there are a couple of reasons for that. The first is that you want it to be accessible to everybody, no matter, if they're blind or deaf or whatever. So it's important to make sure that your website is designed that way. But the other thing is that there has been an increase in people who get organizations and businesses that have been sued for not doing that. So you want to make sure you're covered. So the thing that you do to produce a accessible website is you're going to tag all the images. I have a package for you which is going to include a link that shows best practices for that, so that you can adhere for them. It's actually not doing it. You're not doing anything that you shouldn't be doing for yourself anyway, because you want your website to be visited by a lot of people. But it is but it is also a good thing to do for a bunch of other reasons that have to do with accessibility and like you know, lessening your exposure to risk. So those are good things to keep in. Yeah, so at this point we have reached the Q&A section of the talk, and so I wanted to open it up to anybody who might have some questions about what they might need for their website. So this is the time now that if you have a question, you should send it off. Okay, so I have answered all of the questions through, through this particular lecture. Here we are. Yes. So somebody says, what template do I use on Squarespace? So, and this is Jonathan. So Jonathan, I used the 7.1 template. I can't remember what the name is, but if you Google 7.1 Squarespace templates, they'll give you a list. All of the templates have the exact same functionality, so you can use them. And the reason I use them is because they had a little bit more control over what you did from page to page. And they also have some different commerce functions that I could see myself using in the future. So if I wanted to put somebody on a wait list, for example, I could do that. Now, the reason that it's not ideal for me still, though, is that with that particular website, I had some problems because it doesn't migrate. If you have your stuff already on the 7.0 website, it's not that, it doesn't migrate things over that well. And I wanted to put captions on all of my art images, and it doesn't do that right now. So I used it anyway because because I didn't know that. Sometimes this is the way you find out about limitations is, you know, it's impossible to know like to read through everything. So, you know, you do a little bit of trial and error. However, so yeah, so that's what I use on paddyjohnson.com. Let's see, hold on, I see some other questions coming in here. Yes, can I elaborate on, oh wait. So Dylan asks, do you recommend coding your own website if you have the skills, or sticking with the sites that offer pre-made templates and interfaces? Well, I think it really depends on what you want. I really like WordPress. I think if you have the skills and you can use WordPress, it's preferable for a couple of reasons. One, the templates are all free, so you have to pay for your hosting, but normally that's going to cost you less than a Squarespace website. So I think that that's useful. The thing that is less useful is that, you know, you want to be really picky about the types of templates that you use, because one of the good things about you know, an art specific template is it has all these, like, you know, and here's where you put your caption in, and it kind of tells you what needs to be there, or you get a sense of that. And I think that's like one of the things that I very often see with people who code their own websites is that the websites, the websites like have their own flair, but then they have like sort of specific problems that arise from the fact that maybe they are not, you know, UX design experts, or maybe they don't actually know how these captions should be laid out. So there's not a specific field asking you about that. I will say that in Squarespace, the captioning is just like you put a caption here, so it doesn't tell you like what order something needs to be in. So you should always be like looking at what the standardized version is of that in whatever field that you're in. I don't, excuse me if I, okay.
No worries, no worries, M&A.
Sorry?
It's M&A.
M&A, okay, sorry, yeah. My bad.
Yeah, no worries, no worries.
So M&A is asking if I could elaborate on privacy. How can I make sure that I'm not giving away content that I put online? Normally this is sort of I would begin with a disclaimer that I am not a privacy expert. And I think there's sort of a difference between privacy and giving away and ownership, right? So like, am I putting my, like Squarespace, for example, has a functionality that if you decide you don't want your website to be public, you can just press private and everything is private. Facebook has some, you know, you can make a private group. You can, but like the ownership, it's like a shared ownership of property. So I don't know if you guys listen to Reply All. I personally think it is the best podcast that has ever been made on the face of this planet. So that's my, but they're like, they basically it's like a tech and culture podcast. And they talked to somebody who was, for whatever reason, had a face that people were drawn to as an advertising face. So his face, like an image from his profile, was used in a ad, and he was unhappy about that. I can't remember the particular reason why, but like I think basically, oh, I know what happened. They published him as like a sample user, but they published more information than they should have. So he had a bunch of, like, he had a privacy breach, and they said, hey, we're sorry. But once that information is out there, it's just out there. And of course it's connected to his face because his photograph is there. So mistakes happen. They're rare. If you're using Facebook, I think the thing to know is that they say that they can use your images at any time. Normally, you would think that would be a good thing, but I think in most cases they're going to be using images of your face, not your work. So that's, I think those are things to just, I would say that, you know, just to be cautious about and aware of. I think the user does not have a lot of like levers at their control, like that give them a lot of power. So I think the most important thing is to just know that you know, when you're using these things, that you don't have a lot of power. And that's like, that is the same with Instagram, right? Once you upload it, it's like upload work, it's basically theirs. I think if you're really interested in photos, in managing photos, Flickr is a very good device for that, because they have Creative Commons licensing, so you can license all of your photographs, and you have a lot of kind of granular control over what licenses you give your particular photograph. So you can say like, okay, I'm going to use this photograph, like this set of photographs is only available to people for commercial use. So it's said right out front that if they have to get permission, or like you, it's not only about, you can say like, it's not authorized for commercial use. So they would have to get permission from you and probably pay you for that photograph, right? So, so you can set those parameters. So Flickr is a good one for that. And then, so Morton is following up, yes. Okay, so Morton's following up on Dylan's question. If you can, in fact, code your own website, how would you obtain a domain and or a server, and would be obtaining a one-time purchase or an ongoing payment? So domains are not one-time purchases, although they sort of make it seem like that. When you have a website, you got to think about it a little like a cell phone or something, right? Like there's just going to be ongoing payments for as long as you have that thing, and you basically can't go without it. So you're signing up for life. That's my own like web-centric position, but that is like, if you want to keep that work, that's kind of the deal. You can always download it and save it locally. But that is the deal. So when you would obtain a domain, the domain comes from, like, let's say GoDaddy or name.com. And typically the prices for those domains, I think they're about like somewhere between like a first year is between like $11 and like 13 or something. Like anything with a .art is maybe $19 a year, so it's more expensive. And so you're going to be paying that every year. And the prices will fluctuate. GoDaddy gives you a price for a better price if you sign on for like say 3 years at a time or 5 years at a time. Now you have to get that, whether the domain, you have to get whether or not you are purchasing a Squarespace like rental agreement or whatever. So just to know that, let's say you're paying, I don't know, like $200 a year to Squarespace, you're gonna pay an additional like $13 to GoDaddy. Now, if you are doing the code route, you don't need to pay you don't need to pay Squarespace or anything like that, but you will need to pay a domain host. So the domain host, an example of a domain host might be like DreamHost, or I use something called WP Engine. So it's that is specifically for WordPress, and I use that. And the reason I like them is because one of the funny things about WordPress is that it's, I don't want to say it's like, it's not exactly a rickety system, but like it's been around forever. So there's always new plugins and different functionalities that are sort of built into the templates. Now, if you remove a plugin from a template, it can interfere with the functionality. What WP Engine does is that it manages a lot of that, like updating to the latest version of WordPress, and it'll tell you if you have a vulnerable plugin and you need to replace it, that sort of thing. So that's useful. But I guess that's to sort of add to the layer of, okay, I know how to manage, I know how to do code. You kind of have to know, one, how to code your website, but then you have to sort of learn how to manage the web hosting and the general upkeep. And that's something that Squarespace and Wix and front.com or anything like that, like those are systems that are going to take care of all that stuff for you. And so that's why, you know, I have a WordPress site and I have a Squarespace site. But I do, because of my own level of ability, I prefer the Squarespace site because I can't do all of those updates. However, you know, I think I generally trust WordPress a little bit more. Like if you have the skills, I think WordPress like gives you the kind of security that I definitely look for. So that would be my my thought on that. Does anybody have any other questions? Did I miss anybody's question? I feel like we've gotten most of them then. All right, so here's what's going to happen. I think Sophia is going to share a document with you later in the day. I have to transfer some of the materials, but I'm going to give you a bunch of resources so that you have a lot of this information. You don't have to just remember the individual slides. It's going to be all there for you. And hopefully that'll be helpful for you when you start making the website, because I do think that this will, you know, you do want to know like who the hosts are, what the costs are, like that sort of stuff. But I also want to make sure that you have all of the resources available to you in terms of outreach and you know, being able to really reach people with your new website. So that will be available to you soon. And I just want to thank all of you for coming, because you know, it's always a lot of fun for me to talk to people about website development and like what works and what doesn't. And you've all been a really fun crew to chat with.